Foreigners from across the world gathered on the grounds of Mulyang Sa Temple in Pololo Valley, Oahu, to imagine a global non-killing society. University of Hawaii political scientist Dr. Glenn D. Page, author of A Global Non-Killing Political Science, gathered guests from over 40 countries for consultation of this great idea. In our first program, we show thoughts of non-killing societies from a Hawaiian, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, humanist, and Islamic approach.
Well, our next speaker, unfortunately, cannot be with us. The next paper is from Professor Wokocha, who is the Provost of the River State College of Education in Nigeria. And the paper will be read by Fidelis Allen, who is a lecturer, Department of Administrative and Political Studies at the University of Port Harcourt in Nigeria. And Fidelis is founder of the Center for Global Nonviolence in Nigeria. We would like to welcome him to give the paper.
Professor Wokocha was not able to secure his visas here, so he has asked me to read this paper. He has asked me to send greetings to this forum, and special greetings to Professor Blaine and his wife. Please permit me to read this paper. Conflict is part of humanity, and it is a factor for social transformation. But a choice of strategies for resolution of such conflicts has for long become a great concern to many. Violence, a common approach in Nigeria among groups, individuals, and the government, spawns disorder and in many ways is counterproductive. Nigeria has been shaped by a culture of violence, a trait that has engendered human, emotional, and material losses at various periods. Cultism, emergence of ethnic militias, and many other social vices that lead directly to killings are rampant in Nigeria. In short, cult groups are almost destroying campuses of tertiary institutions in Nigeria. They have brought unnecessary grief to parents, in addition to rendering the authorities difficult times and near powerlessness over emplacement or decent administration in the educational institutions. Killing, maiming, and disfiguring, as well as sexual harassments, have endured on university campuses as a result of the activities of cult groups and criminal gangs. Government has made several efforts to erase the problem of cultism from the school system in Nigeria, but to no avail. For example, there now exists a federal legislation that outlaws cultism and stipulates jail time of 5 years or 250,000 naira, fine or both for students convicted of cultism. Early in 1989, Decree number 47 was promulgated by the federal government to empower governing councils of each university to proscribe any group operating within campuses whose activities are inimical to national security, public safety, order, morality, and health. These efforts on the part of the government appear not to have produced the desired results. Being an educationist and a long-time university administrator, my observation and conviction of the role of education in the transformation of any society cannot be overemphasized. Indeed, no society or country develops without a sound educational system, but this must now be by discovering the capabilities for eliminating violence in the society. Teachers should be regarded to play an indispensable role and be so prepared to carry out that role. It is this background that makes my participation and that of Fidelis Allen in this forum highly monumental for the Niger Delta, Nigeria, and the world. The Nonkilling Society, defined by Glenn as a human community, smallest to the largest, local to global, characterized by no killing of humans and no threats to kill, no weapons designed to kill humans, and no justifications for using them, and no conditions of society dependent upon threat or use of killing force for maintenance or change. Such a society may only be achieved when or if everyone, governmental organization, educational system and its institutions, private organizations, social groups, and national educational curricula respond to this call in meaningful ways that extol the place of the teacher to play an important moral role. It therefore follows that to emplace the teacher to play this role, government cannot be left alone to cater for the moral and overall erection of a well-trained teaching force. The moral crisis in the education system in Nigeria can best be addressed through education in which the teacher and the student are central both for practical vocational orientation in nonviolent problem solving and spreading of the non-killing thesis. Therein also depends stability, development, and peace in Nigeria and the world. For example, this short period in the existence and activities of the Center for Global Nonviolence Nigeria, which I also enlisted because of this thinking about the educational route to nonviolence, is impressively bringing a message so clearly to a supposed dying populace in the Niger Delta. I use the word because a generation of morally decadent and violent youths is a dying one. Peace is a factor in development and is needed from the level of the individual, interpersonal, to social and group relations. It follows that educating for the peace of any society is education for political stability, which is basic for planning and advancement. Indeed, education is the most important instrument of social re-engineering. The process of achieving peace in the world actually begins with the individual self. Only when individuals have peace with themselves that peace in the wider society can be guaranteed. Dewey's 6-level schema, although with modification here, illustrates this better. And here, Professor Wokocha talks about a schema which involves peace with self as the foundation for achieving peace in the world. The teacher plays an indispensable role in this process, but achieving peace with self, the foundation of peace at other levels, can be difficult to come without the collective endeavors on the part of the government and organizations like the Center for Global Nonviolence to provide opportunities for discovering individual potentials or capabilities for peace. It is for this reason that the emergence of the Center for Global Nonviolence will continue to be a serious determinant of how much extant culture of violence would have been curbed in the near future. Institutional building for capacity building is key if the engagement of teachers and the education system in general towards achieving the non-killing society in Nigeria is so desirable as I think. I have supported and will continue to do so, no matter how little, in the activities of the Center for Global Nonviolence, Nigeria. Even so, evidently, it is a task that requires meaningful support from a wider audience to the consolidation of the NGO in Nigeria. Materials for training and for other activities are rightly needed to support the organization and mobilization of the entire society of Nigeria towards a killing-free one. As a concluding remark, I thank Professor Glenn, the governing board of the Center for Global Nonviolence, Honolulu, for inviting me and Fidelis Allen to attend this forum. It is my hope that this will mark the beginning of new orientation on a global scale towards the problem of killing in the world. Thank you.
Well, our thanks to Professor Wokocha for his excellent paper, where he stresses the role of education and particularly teachers in the transformation of to a non-killing society. And thank you very much indeed to you, Fidelis Allen, for reading it so well. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Final speaker of this section is Dr. Jose V. Abueva, President of Kalayaan College in Manila, former President of the University of the Philippines, also a former Professor of Political Science and Public Administration, and former Secretary of the UN University. My introduction to him was through the book which his university and his college put together in 2004 called Towards a Non-Killing Filipino Society, Developing an Agenda of Policy and Action. So Professor Abueva, look forward to hear from you. I'm just trying to see. There he is.
Friends and colleagues, Abueva. Abueva is the equivalent of Aloha. Literally it means live. But it really says, let's celebrate life together. My life, your life, our lives. I'm very glad to be here with you all. Greet you, Abueva, and especially Glenn and Glenda. You know, my wife never ceases to wonder what a blissful union there is in Glenn and Glenda. Must be more than coincidental. The topic on the global significance of the Nonkilling Thesis, let me say 4 or 5 points. First of all, is the fact that Glenn has raised the question, is a non-killing society possible? And defined what kind of society it is. Beyond this, he asks the question and actually advances the hypothesis, which is in effect, a global non-killing society is possible and achievable under certain conditions. Philosophy and science advance by seeking valid and reliable answers to meaningful questions. Glenn has raised such fundamental and challenging questions in his great work. 2, empirical evidence is presented to disprove the belief and premise human beings or human nature is inherently violent and that killing, not non-killing, is the norm or rule in most societies. This empirical fact and assertion is hopeful and encouraging to those who seek to bring about and sustain peace and development and law and order in more and more non-killing local and national communities. It would be enlightening to the people concerned, and it would inspire and build national confidence and pride if scientific surveys and in-depth studies could establish that many local communities and a few national communities around the world are practically non-killing communities as defined by Glenn Page. This will change the conventional wisdom about killing being a human impulse and thus inevitable and ineradicable. Third, having determined their existence, that is, non-killing societies, global to national, it would be instructive to learn what conditions have made those non-killing communities emerge or develop and sustain themselves. Glenn has suggested some of these conditions and variables. He has, for example, pointed to the growing number of countries that have abolished the death penalty, promoted nonviolent means of resolving disputes, organized nonviolent movements and institutions to promote peace, social harmony, human rights, and social justice, and to the few countries that have abolished their armies. Fourth, an aspect of the non-killing thesis is the challenge to political science and other social and other branches of knowledge to examine their basic premises and suppositions that may be violence accepting or violence prone, rather than being consciously supportive of peace, nonviolence, justice, and non-killing as societal values and goals in an emerging vision of the good society. If philosophy and technology can advance knowledge and understanding to enhance the quality of material life, studies on the fundamental problem of killing and the factors that promote the value and goal of non-killing could also lead to the enhancement of morality and spirituality as a self-sustaining force and as a reinforcing force to those who would like to bring about a non-killing society. This is needed in the quest for human and social development. Growing international and global cooperation and interreligious dialogue for greater national tolerance and understanding among nations can very well include the value and goal of non-killing societies and a non-killing global society as a universal vision. 6. The non-killing thesis offers a theoretical framework for specific local and national research. Thus, based on Glenn's theory of non-killing global society, in February 2004, we applied this challenging question by asking a group of Filipino social scientists and leaders the question, is a non-killing society possible in the Philippines? We asked them to examine the problems, prospects, and requirements in bringing about a peaceful, non-killing society in our country. As a result of those individual inquiries and responses, we held a series of meetings in 4 universities in the Philippines, one in the southern Philippines, and collected our lectures in this book, as mentioned already, Towards a Non-Killing Filipino Society, Developing an Agenda for Research, Policy, and Action. So we tested Glenn's theory. One of our participants, Ambassador Howard D., makes this qualification. A society to qualify as a non-killing society for us to emulate and aspire to attain must be a benevolent, life-sustaining society in all aspects of life, in all human activity, and in all human relationships, internally amongst its own, and externally in dealing with the peoples of the world. He poses 7 propositions, and his conclusion in responding to the question, is a non-killing, life-sustaining society possible in the Philippines? We want to pursue the inquiry and engage more and more leaders, scholars, students, and communities in the common Filipino quest for peace and development, and governance and democratization, anchored on the moral premise of a non-killing society. Now, we behavioral scientists and political scientists like to believe that they are behavioral social scientists, are fond of using systems analysis to impress our students, I suppose. On the one hand, you have this dependent variable that you would like to influence or bring about by a series of independent variables that with each other. But I thought I would be bolder, try poetry. I'm no poet. And that's why one archbishop, a very kindly archbishop, has called me a Don Quixote. But he urged me, go ahead, be a Don Quixote. So over the years, as I tried to learn about the quest for peace, for a non-violent world and non-killing world, I tried to summarize what I have learned in these stanzas. Poetry, as we know, is the most parsimonious way of expressing an idea or a feeling or beauty, if you are a real poet. And it's the indivisible peace we seek. In unity with our people and all humankind, we seek a just and enduring law and order and mutual tolerance at home and around the world. We want an end to killing and maiming because of greed or creed, class or tribe, because the poor are weak and the strong aren't just, or for whatever reason, or senselessness. But the peace we seek is much more than the absence of lethal force and physical violence. It is a non-killing world, borrowed from Glenn Pates, devoid of threats and acts to kill, torture, destroy, impoverish, and humiliate. It is the tranquil freedom, fruit of freedom, social justice, and human development. Quote, under the rule of law, truth, and love, unquote, for one another, according to our Constitution. Our Constitution may very well be the only one, or the very few, mentions love as a value. But the peace we seek is more than that. It is also the tranquil fruit of freedom. It is a state of society marked by respect and reverence for the life and rights of every human being, and learning from various religions and cultures. It is the positive feeling people have about their safety and security as individuals and as members of their communities. Quote, local to global. This is from Glenn. It is the gratifying feeling of being in harmony with oneself, with fellow men and women and children, with nature and with God, and the empowering feeling of solidarity and cooperation with family, neighborhood and nation, region, and humankind. With God's grace, this is the peace in our time and in the future, as the caring, sharing, and democratic nation and world we hope and want to become. May I end by volunteering to set up an institute for a non-killing society in my little Kalayaan College. That's the advantage of having a very small college and being president of it. To be part of the emerging network on non-killing global society. Thank you. These are the books that, first in 2003, I collaborated with Glenn to publish an English edition of his book, since we are an English-speaking nation as well. Then that book that tried to answer Glenn's proposition. And today I brought 20 copies of the translation of Glenn's book into Filipino, our emerging national language. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, all the speakers this morning, this afternoon. We went on a very interesting journey from our speakers who took us from Jordan to Nigeria to China to Russia to Philippines, to show actually that in their respective cultures and the political environment, how they were able to seed non-killing thesis, and it's how it has sprouted in very different forms and shapes. And Professor Abueva's conclusion more or less sort of nicely summed it up, both in terms of the prose and poetry, the scope, the potential, the spirituality, the depth, both heart and head, bringing it together. So thank you, all the presenters. Now it's time for everyone else. We have got 15 minutes of questions which you would pose to the presenters this afternoon. And so we are open here to any questions, please. Or comments?
There's a mobile here somewhere.
You can bring both the discursive knowledge as well as the emotional, whatever, inspiration and all that into one. That's but my personal experience. I have tried on my own. I brought a copy for Professor Page. I would call the first non-killing Buddhist play with this audience. Tomorrow I'll bring it to. Thank you.
Peace and performing arts.
One comment that I wanted to make, that I think that certainly you can make the argument for any one form of art, but what impressed me was thinking of the younger generation and certainly the impact of iPods, that music is certainly got to be up near the top. And you mentioned writing sick of John Lennon's Imagine, certainly consciously or not, to a lot of the youth of the world, that one song had a major impact.
I think if the culture is to be a culture of love, a culture of celebration, culture which would be positive and lift spirits, then most certainly our young generation can help us in creating this culture with their great ability and gift to sing and dance. But I think also we can take hope from how quickly a thing can change. We all remember the idea that it was quite hip to smoke. And then when the medical profession said that smoking is bad for your health, and they joined forces with governments and forces with, sorry for that bad, they joined in cooperation with the governments and cooperation with the media people. In a very short period, we moved away from a culture of smoking. So I feel it's a cooperative effort, because if we say that, well, violence is bad for your health, as is war and nuclear weapons and arms sales, then I think we could, if we could quite quickly change the culture. So it's very much a cooperative thing. We all have a role to play in that.
I just want to say that probably the most important change in my lifetime, I was born in 1954, the ecology. When I was 10, nobody knew what ecology was all about. But in these years, we know the legal aspect. In Colombia or any place in the world, you cannot build a factory or a house or anything without getting an environmental permit or acceptance, and you have to prove that you are going to make an impact, negative impact on the environment. We also created the laws, we created the institutions, and also we created the academy. You can go to study environmental issues at the university. we have to do the same as far as nomadism. I learned only 5 years ago, I learned that human beings were not violent in their nature. So we have to go to schools and we have to teach everybody that conflict is part of life, and the way how you react to conflict is something that can learn to manage. And I go back to the point that I mentioned this morning, which we have to change education. It cannot be only about making a living, but about having a life. You have to be able to understand that there are other human beings around you, and you have to think about the conditions and what they are living. Otherwise, you will not be safe.
I think I'm from Bangladesh. I think in most of the societies of the world, people generally they don't want to be involved in
violence or killing. They want to live in peace and tranquility. But it's the tragic reality is that in most of the cases, the political leaders or the politicians who are in power, they pay heed to the well-being of the people. But the political scientists, they are not in power in most of these countries. It is the politicians and who make the politics. And when they are not in power, what they say, when they are in power, they don't do according to their commitments. And if it is the case, how will we be able to establish a non-killing, which is the cherished desire of most of the people of the world?
What is the answer except that I can say that testimonies which we have heard this morning, those testimonies show that we can reverse, we can make our contribution. Usually in these things I tell people, I'm in Ottawa with the Canadian Federal Department of Peace Initiative and trying to lobby for a Department of Peace within the federal government. Now, if you ask this ordinary person, the sky on the street, he would be saying, oh, you're dreaming, and most of us, whatever we are doing, if we go and talk to anyone, they'll say, that's impossible. But I know how much progress we have made just in past 3 years. But I tell everyone who joins us, I said, don't join us because you're thinking that it will happen tomorrow. These are generational questions. The culture of violence, as they say, took ages to where it is. And for culture of peace also, we'll have to be patient and do our little bit, whatever we can do. And that one step counts more than anything else. And I was just telling Maraj this afternoon about what one of my mentors have said to me. He said, don't worry about the changing the world because the changes itself. Think about changing yourself. And if you are able to do that, the world will change. Because if you think about changing the world, then you're thinking of such a huge issue there. I am one person, that big world, so many billions of people, but if you change yourself, or if you can think in those small terms, then we feel empowered. I'm sure Dr. Ariratne has done so much work over so many years. Would you like to comment on it, Doctor?
As I mentioned earlier, there are many factors contributing to this situation. We are from youth taking to crimes, organized underworld gangs doing contract killings, governments themselves organized, spending most of their money for armies. There are those who are anti-government getting organized. So these things happen. They are a reality, they are there. But at the same time, we can generate reverse processes, for which you have to have a lot of confidence, fearlessness. Because there's an old Sanskrit Pali, there are 4 words which say when you mentally then you get divided. That without taking the living world as one, or humanity as one, then you divide into various castes, races, clans, color, all that. Then that brings about a separation between people. That means Chanda, bringing up here. Desha is ill. Then it leads to fear. Naturally they begin to fear. And then you organize these three, mental separation, ill will and fear into a kind of a science. Not a science, it's an organized thing together. And then say, this community is always like that, selfish. This community is, so you begin to give labels, not only to individuals, but even to various groups. So we have to release the opposite forces. Now, when I go to an area where there are so many different religious or other groups, I don't even mention. All I say is, here's a big problem, you people have no water. You need this very big repair, this half a mile long one to be rebuilt. Let's get together and do it. While doing it, they forget all their differences. And then they turn towards violent ways of transformation rather than getting guns and fighting somebody. So it's our own will. So it needs a lot of fearlessness on your part. You have to risk your life all the time to make other people live.
Question.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm from Korea. After facing the translation, Dr. Glenn pages put me to Korean. I'm fully understanding what it means in theory of balance and nonkilling. I have one question after hearing this afternoon session. As a non-artist, I think particular science or particular theory can be persuasive, can be productive when it can provide some practical description to the problems which you see in the real world of practice. So I'd like to ask you one question. What kind of strategic ideas or description can we provide to the people who is working with Al-Qaeda, especially in terms of the principle of non-violence in general, or in terms of Islamic tradition? But I'd like to hear from who is involved in Islamic religion or Islamic political theory.
We really have such a distinguished group here, people with experience. Raising the child of first island working together.
Actually, I want to provoke George rather than answer your question. So I do both. Well, for lack of time, I think the interesting thing to think through the question of terrorism, particularly what has been termed as Muslim terrorist, is not the difference between Muslim terrorists and other things, but I would urge you to think through the similarity between, let's say, suicide bombers and nonviolent practitioners, how much they have in common. And then based on that commodities, think about what are the kind of differences that they have. Let's give you two examples. The similarity between, let's say, a suicide bomber anywhere in the world, be it in Sri Lanka or in Palestine, and a nonviolent practitioner is their conception of death. And you can be a pure Gandhian and argue that, or a pure Buddhist, and say that dying for those people who work for nonviolence and non-killing, there are several ways to die, and people ask the question, what will be the good way to die?
And a good way to die is in service of a cause. So in that regards, I think Gandhian or people working for terrorism will share very much in common the notion of dying. Dying for what? That's the other question. The difference, however, is there are many, but one thing I like to call into question is the notion of the innocence. I think what suicide bombers have done or terrorists have done is to bypass the notion of the innocence, to believe that there are no innocence. Whereas for nonviolence, the notion of the world with innocence characterized by mercy, I think, is of utmost importance. That can be understood both from an Islamic point of view as well as political science point of view. So, I can share with you some of the things along this line that is important. Coming back to George, I think George's question is, though provocative, is misleading. It's misleading because if you ask the kind of arts that are amenable to nonviolence or non-killing, you get the answer you have. But if I were to rephrase the question and ask, what kind of arts has done more to corrupt the notion of non-killing and non-violence? I don't think it's poetry. I don't think it's... I think the area that we have to work with, perhaps, is in the area of popular culture. Imagine a movie of non-killing heroes and heroines in this world today. Imagine Steven Spielberg sitting in this room with us and then think about constructing a life of, let's say, Nobel laureate hero on nonviolence and peace. Things like that. George Lucas and others. I think that is the area that we might have to think about if we want to change the world. And you can change the world thinking in what ways you want. You can be a political scientist, you can be an artist, or you can be, someone working like Bill, for example. But you think about the world with you in it. I think that's the key.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. We are going to be tomorrow, getting into a section where we have the awakening experiences. So where we'll have, Dr. Lafayette, Professor Galtung, others will be telling Shanti Sena, talking about how they have worked at conflict resolution on ground. Professor, perhaps addressing the question you raised, So I think it's a good intro into that, Any other question or comment? Please.
Yes, I'm not a scholar, so I do lots of volunteer work in the communities. And I guess how person like me, activist, or day-to-day working with the issues. For instance, in my case, I go to the prisons once a month and do the non-violent communication. But how I guess my thinking is like a macroeconomy versus microeconomy. And I think today I hear at macroeconomics. So how can I apply that to my day-to-day operations, if I say so? Is there anybody that's like a good idea on that?
Has anybody got a good idea on that? I can just only comment because I don't have answer to your question. While some people are thinking about it, how to respond to that big question, it's a very personal journey which all we get involved with. But I just want to mention about this question which Professor Page has raised: is non-society feasible or not? And my personal experience with that question, that's a very easy way. I'm not by profession a teacher or a speaker. I'm a civil servant, and we civil servants are usually quiet, retiring. We don't like to stand out. So when I got into promoting non-killing, the vision, I was wondering how to do this. And I took that question, is non-killing society possible? And I have used that question with various groups, adults as well as youth. And that has proven very effective because it's such an open-ended question. You throw it out there, and you're not asking people to tell me, say yes to that question or no to this question, but it starts the discussion going. You go around, and people would tell you yes, no, and then in the end, it will come to me. And as a facilitator, I'm already transformed or converted, so I have the reasons for why it's yes. At the same time, I don't tell them that they should be saying, they should convert themselves to my viewpoint. And I find that very experience has been very enriching. And in the end, we do this voting. We start with the voting, how many are for yes, how many are for no, and then we go around, and at the end of 1 hour or 2 hours, we again do that, yes or no, and you find that change there, because people had, first of all, they have never focused. How many of us focus on this question on everyday basis? So once people start focusing, then they start realize, oh yeah, probably it makes sense. The non-killing society is feasible because you provide them with, and I think that's what I found as a political scientist in Glenn's work. There was evidence, and then I sort of expanded on it because I knew what were the basis for that. And this is very much the macro level I'm talking about. At the micro level, you get into the work, which Charles is doing, Bernard is doing, and other, in terms of conflict resolution, crime prevention. But at the macro level, that question has been very enriching and moving, and because it's open-ended. My 2 cents.
I think that, thank you for all your work that you do, especially with the prisoners. And I think that Mother Teresa was once asked her best to do your work, and she said, do the little things with great love. And if you were asking the Dalai Lama, he would talk about kindness, being kind to all you meet, talk about compassion. And I think that the world is hungry for those kindness and love and compassion, and it is the most powerful tool. I know our political scientists, even those who are in the counselling field in universities, they don't like to use the word love because we can't really describe love, but no one would ever say it doesn't exist. So I think just bring that ethos of gentleness, of kindness, of compassion into the moment, so that when you're with the prisoner, you're with the prisoner. You're not in yesterday and you're not in tomorrow. You are fully present to that person in whose company you have the gift and the honour to be sharing. So the whole presence that we as peace activists bring to the moment together is very important.
Time to close. Thank you very much, the presenters, speakers, and all of you.